You wake up to an alarm you hate for a job you tolerate, and you sit in traffic to reach a building where you'll spend the next 8 hours doing things that mostly won't matter a week from now. You do it to afford an apartment you're barely in, and a weekend that's over before it begins, and yet you call this normal. For 99% of human history, it wasn't. Your ancestors had none of the problems that quietly structure your day. No alarm, no commute, no manager, no inbox, no Sunday anxiety about Monday. For nearly 300,000 years, humans woke up when they wanted, worked when they had to, and stopped when the work was done. But here's the part that should bother you. How long done actually took each day is a number anthropologists have measured over and over, and I'll give it to you before the end. Because once you hear it, the way you look at your own week starts to fall apart. There's also one thing these people had every single day that most of us will go an entire lifetime without feeling even once. Keep that in the back of your mind too, because what your ancestors did with their days is probably nothing like what you're imagining. It's roughly 70,000 years ago in East Africa, just before sunrise. You're asleep on the ground beside 20 or 30 people you've known your entire life. In fact, just about every person you'll ever know is within arm's reach right now. Last night's fire has nearly burned itself out, and soon someone will throw on more wood. Not because it's their job or because the schedule says fire duty, but simply because that's what you do when the fire becomes ash. There are no meetings here, no calendars, no productivity hacks, and no one is behind on anything. As the sun climbs higher, the group begins to split, and the day's real work begins. The women move confidently across a landscape they've known since childhood, reading it the way you'd read a street you've walked 1,000 times. And this is where our picture of primitive people quietly collapses, because the average forager knows between 200 and 300 plant species, which ones fruit in which season, which roots are worth digging, which berries feed you, and which ones will kill you, and exactly how much of each it takes. This isn't wandering around hoping to get lucky. It's operating inside a knowledge system that takes years to master, where a single mistake can be fatal. Meanwhile, the men who've gone out to hunt are doing something researchers describe as one of the most cognitively demanding tasks a human brain can perform. From a footprint, some bent grass, a few disturbed leaves, and a patch of compressed soil, they reconstruct an animal's weight, its speed, the direction it was heading, and where it will probably be hours from now. Anthropologists studying expert trackers in the Kalahari often describe watching this happen and feeling like they're seeing something close to magic. Although of course it isn't. It's pattern recognition, refined over an entire lifetime. Applied to problems where getting it wrong means going hungry, or not coming home at all. So this is hard work, and there's no pretending otherwise. Body and brain are fully engaged. But notice what's different about it. You're outside, moving through open country. You're with people you love rather than people you tolerate. And you're working toward a goal you can see and touch, and very likely eat before the sun goes down. Hold on to that feeling, because what happens next in their day is the part that made me question everything about mine. At some point, the work simply ends. Not when it starts raining, not when the sun goes down, and not because a manager decides your shift is over. It ends when the thing that needed doing is finally done. There's no next task waiting behind it, no inbox quietly refilling itself while you're not looking. And this is where hunter-gatherer life becomes almost unrecognizable to those of us raised inside the modern work week. Across ethnographic studies from wildly different continents and cultures, the afternoons all start to look strangely similar. People talk for hours. Adults play, not because someone organized a game or penciled recreation into a calendar, but because when human beings are handed free time, playing is simply what they do with it. Tools get repaired slowly and without urgency. Conversations drift wherever they want to go, and all of it unfolds beside people they've known their whole lives. Anthropologist Marshall Solins looked at this pattern and gave hunter-gatherers a title that still sounds like a contradiction. He called them the original affluent society, not because they had more than we do, but because they needed far less. Their needs were met quickly, and everything after that belonged entirely to them, which raises a genuinely uncomfortable question. And it's the third thread I want you to hold on to. If life really was this good, why on earth did anyone ever give it up? Hold that one, because the answer is where this whole story turns. When night arrived, people gathered around the fire, and surprisingly, this wasn't the moment reserved for serious talk or planning tomorrow's hunt. It was leisure. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner spent decades living among and studying the Jew/Hwansi of southern Africa, and she noticed something striking about how their conversation changed with the light. During the day, talk stayed practical: food, plans, who was going where, and doing what. But after sunset, roughly 81% of it turned into storytelling, myths and shared memories, jokes at each other's expense, gossip about who did what, and speculation about things that had never happened and never would. This is also where I can finally answer that second thread, the thing they had every day that you might never feel once. It wasn't safety, and it wasn't comfort. It was this: they were never strangers to anyone, and never alone in a crowd. Not for a single evening of their lives. Every night, the same 30 familiar faces rebuilt the community through stories around the same fire. No notifications, no second screen, no scrolling past 1,000 people you'll never meet. Just total, unbroken belonging every night for an entire lifetime. The one form of wealth our world has almost completely stopped producing, and the evening still didn't stop there. People sang and they danced, not as performers on a stage, but as participants, with everyone pulled into it. They built instruments and played them. And when you look at the things these people left behind, cave paintings, carved figurines, shell beads strung and worn, ochre rubbed into skin, you are very clearly not looking at people barely clinging to survival. You're looking at people with enough time, enough stability, and enough spare creative energy to make things for no reason other than that they wanted to. The oldest cave paintings we've ever found are at least 45,000 years old, which means that somewhere, deep in the Ice Age, someone had a good enough day that they chose to spend their evening making art. A life that full is only possible when work doesn't devour the day around it. And here, at last, is the number I promised you at the start. Across decades of fieldwork, across different cultures on multiple continents, anthropologists keep arriving at the same figure: 3 to 5 hours. That's the average amount of time hunter-gatherers spent on subsistence each day, finding food, maintaining their tools, doing everything genuinely necessary to stay alive. 3 to 5 hours, and then the rest of the day was theirs to spend however they liked. Sit with that for a second, and then look at your own life. You have a 40-hour work week, a side hustle you took on to survive the 40-hour work week, and a vitamin D deficiency from a life spent mostly indoors. So how did we get from one to the other? That's the last thread, and here's where it ties off. Around 10,000 years ago, everything changed, because humans discovered agriculture. But here's the cruel twist the history books tend to skip. Instead of using that abundance to work less, we used it to build systems that demanded more. Longer hours, more mouths, and more obligations, more strangers to deal with, and more hierarchy to answer to. We kept building on top of that, generation after generation, until we ended up exactly where you are now, in a world where a 40-hour work week is considered reasonable, where burnout has quietly become a personality trait, and where an entire afternoon with nothing planned feels less like a right and more like something you have to earn. Your ancestors weren't primitive, they weren't miserable, and they weren't barely holding on while they waited for civilization to arrive and rescue them. Most days, they were finished by noon. Somewhere in the long stretch between then and now, we quietly traded that life away for this one, and nobody ever stopped to ask the rest of us whether it was worth it.